the government is now prepared to agree to holding public hearings on this constitutional accord, or will we have to wait till the Premier gets back to find that out?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that decision has not been made yet.
Okay, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the government seemed prepared to deal with the Premier's statement about potentially pulling Alberta out of Canada. I wonder if the acting Premier has determined whether or not the Premier, upon his return, will be issuing or making a clarifying statement in this House just on that matter.
Sign the accord.
Well, I'm sure the honourable member can ask him when he's back in the House, and I adopt the remarks made yesterday in the House by my colleague.
Final supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I guess I did confirm that we caught them off guard here. I believe that the Deputy Premier yesterday observed that separatism is always a concern, but it's not government policy. That is what he said. He did say it wasn't government policy, but he recognized that this is a concern in Alberta. I wonder if it is government policy that this concern over separatism is to be trotted out every time the government enters into negotiations with Canada or other provinces. Is that the new policy?
Well, I think, Mr. Speaker, the real essence of the argument is the approach often used by the federal government, and it's not from our point of view, a separatist initiative, but when and I'm thinking that the accord today is much of an advance in harmony in the country, and the inclination of the federal government, at least in the past. I'm speaking prior to 1984, and the inclination of the federal government in that period of the past has upset Westerners massively, and some response is needed.
Supplementary Little Bow, followed by Westlock Sturgeon.
The Deputy Premier. Would the Deputy Premier take on the request, I guess in my question, to the Premier on return to table not only the accord, but some of the working documents, and also look at setting aside a special time under ministerial reporting to outline some of the activities and sequence of activities that occurred in and before the signing of the accord, so that we have that information preliminary to the resolution, which will be presented at a later time.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I was asked by the member for Highlands if I talked to the Premier, and since he meets in the meetings until 5:45 in the morning, I haven't talked to him. But that's not my time of day. And I'm sure the agreement will be fully not only provided, but made a subject of a important statement by the Premier, but I can't answer to the other documents and working papers now.
Westlock Sturgeon.
A supplemental, Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Deputy Premier. I pleased to hear that they may be reconsidering the idea of having public hearings around the province so many citizens can put their input into the decision process. But I noticed the Prime Minister announced that he would be putting on the table this fall or next year a proposal for Senate reform. Could the Deputy Premier tell us whether or not this government or the Cabinet will be making a proposal to the Prime Minister to have the Triple E Senate included in that package of Senate reform that he's going to bring to the Constitution table?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't know that I would take the same course that the member did in saying consideration was being given to hold a hearing. That may not happen. That is a decision which will have to be made, yes. And in the meantime, I think the Assembly can be assured that a full explanation and statement and the opportunity for debate will be present in this chamber, and I'm sure many members will want to speak to the resolution. The answer to the second part is I have no doubt that in the time frame of the discussion among the first ministers on the Senate reform, that the Triple E will be very much a part of our government's position.
Second main question, Acting Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It occurs to me that I can offer a fax copy for photocopying for the member for Littlebow. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask a question of the Social Services Minister, who explained to this Assembly just about 3 months ago that the reason that she couldn't pass on the Canada Pension Plan disability increases to their designated recipients who are also receiving AISH, widow's pension, assured income, that is, those people who are so low income that they also get provincial income support programs, was because the CPP increases counted as income, and therefore the increase was deducted from the other income support programs for the low-income elderly Albertans. I wonder if the Minister will now indicate how this government plans to respond to the Federal Health Minister, Jake Epps' objections to the province having pocketed the CPP disability increase monies.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's very laudable that the federal government is finally sharing in some of the costs of the financial programs that the government of Alberta has historically provided to their citizens. And I think all honourable members will know that AISH is unlike any other pension program provided to our citizens, unlike any other program in the rest of Canada. And it is still the most generous program in Canada.
I don't know if the welfare is, though. Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Is it the Minister's intentions, then, to follow the recommendations set out in Mr. Epps' recent letter to her, whereby the increase would not be designated as income, so the increase could actually be passed on to the low-income elderly for whom the increases were intended?
Mr. Speaker, that would be double funding. I think the honourable member should know that in other provinces in Canada, there hasn't been such a pension program in place, and now that the federal government is finally sharing in more of that responsibility, they certainly are helping other provinces to bring up a program that has been suffering very much, but in the province of Alberta, it has always been in place.
Well, thousands of elderly, not very high-income Albertans would disagree with that perspective, Mr. Speaker. Is the minister not prepared then to refund the CPP increases, $152 a month, as of January 1987, to those people, those elderly low-income people who are also receiving assured income, social welfare, and widow's pension? Is that the case?
Mr. Speaker, there are many types of income that are in fact exempt from consideration under the assured income for the severely handicapped. And let it be clear for all honourable members of the House, and they may not need as much assistance as the acting leader of the opposition, but our pension program has always been in place. Such a program has not been in place in other provinces, and now the federal government is finally sharing some of the burden for that program.
Well, final supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. The minister is avoiding the issue. The government has made it clear, the federal government has made it clear that they want this minister to pass on those CPP increases. Is the minister saying absolutely not? Is she absolutely refusing to do that?
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member is asking for Albertans to pay twice, once out of their own pockets through paying taxes provincially, and again through paying federal taxes, Mr. Speaker, no.
Edmonton Goldbar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly the increase was given because of a need, and now some seniors are actually going to get less. Has the minister reviewed the results of this action with seniors' organizations to determine what the fallout is in Alberta, including costs and even savings?
Mr. Speaker, the question was about the assured income for the severely handicapped. And again, Mr. Speaker, we have a pension program in place. That pension program, we had no assistance in terms of the amount over, above, and above what someone on social allowance may receive. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, it is an income-tested program, unlike anything else in Canada. So the federal government is, for the first time, bearing some of the costs of that program.
Main question, Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my question today also to the Honourable Minister of Social Services. Yesterday, the Minister of Social Services stated that we do have adequate standards and monitoring practices in the province's daycares. Yet, a delegation of parents, I believe that they expecting 25 daycares they visited were abominable, were the words used. All along now, the minister has encouraged parents to monitor daycares, which is what they were doing. Now they have, and they found these standards lacking. Does the minister's complete satisfaction with existing standards also include her satisfaction with existing staff qualifications?
Mr. Speaker, I have addressed that question many times in the House, and all honourable members will know that I have received a lot of information with respect to qualifications and suggestions as to how staff should be screened who are working in child care centres, and I am taking that into consideration.
Mr. Speaker, we cannot wait forever. There are children out there being almost to the point of mistreatment. Well then, if the minister is not willing to go ahead with standards, has the minister been encouraging the federal minister of health and welfare, to implement national staff standards which this province could then adopt?
Mr. Speaker, child care is the responsibility or the jurisdiction of the provincial government. And Mr. Speaker, I have time and time again answered the question that the honourable member is putting, but I do object to the preface when speaking about standards as if we have no standards in place. In fact, Alberta, with respect to programming and so on, space, staff ratios in particular, has some of the finest standards in the country. And I leave open the consideration with respect to the qualifications of staff, which I have said on a number of occasions are under consideration.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm having a little trouble following the minister. If the province really has no real staff standards of substance and is not encouraging, in other words, you think that the federal government's sticking their nose in your business, and they're not encouraging a national staff standards, is the minister planning to oppose the implementation of national standards then?
Mr. Speaker, once more, with feeling for the Honourable Leader, daycare is the jurisdiction of the provincial government, and we have the particular area in question under consideration.
Mr. Speaker, there's no question that the minister is opposing national standards and then, I suppose, not collect money. But this government is constantly bragging about being the pacesetter across Canada in the terms of money thrown at people services. Yet it is at the bottom of the list in the terms of staff standards and daycare facilities. Why is the minister reluctant, gives us double talk, dances around the point, why she's reluctant to upgrade staff standards when other provinces have already done so?
Mr. Speaker, not with too much feeling. I would say for the Honourable Leader that this is a very important question. I would first of all make the comment that I'm sure the Honourable Premier would make if he were here and answering a question related to Ottawa, and that is that we do not look forward to an imposition by Ottawa of certain things with respect to provincial jurisdiction. The parents of this province, and while there would not be 25,000 of them involved, there are some 25,000 plus children in formal childcare in this province. And it is my view that the parents indeed are very capable and are exercising their responsibility with respect to childcare and choosing childcare.
Edmonton Calder supplementary, followed by Calgary Foothills supplementary.
Supplementary to the Minister, Mr. Speaker. With 7 inspectors in the Edmonton region expected to monitor 320 centres, would the Minister agree to increase the number of inspectors in order that they can in fact do proper monitoring?
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Honourable Member chastised the Minister about encouraging parents to, as I stated yesterday, to also be vigilant in addressing the respective daycare centres in terms of those standards being in place. And the Honourable Member went on to say that, well, if Mr. Speaker, if the police use that system, we'd really be in trouble. And that is getting people to effectively also participate in our society. Mr. Speaker, we have a rural crime watch. We have blocked parents. We have many, many programs in our society in which people participate. In fact, they are vigilant and they are looking out for their children and their community.
Calgary Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, in visiting daycare centres over the province, I would like to inquire of the Minister what steps have been taken in this province in order to improve quality of daycare centres.
Mr. Speaker, I think that the enormous commitment in funding that the taxpayers of this province are making in order to enhance those standards, especially with respect to the child and caretaker, child care worker ratios, is very important, because I think that most of us who have raised families will understand that at a very early age, children do need attentive treatment and individual treatment with respect to that care, and the amount of funding that has gone into child care in particular has allowed us to have some of the highest standards with respect to those ratios in Canada.
Member for Little Bow, followed by Red Deer North.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the provincial treasurer. 40% of Canadian corporate tax are paid by Alberta firms, and the federal tax paper is coming out on June the 18th. I was wondering if the provincial treasurer could indicate what steps have been taken since the last time I asked this sequence of questions to impress the federal government on their tax policy and some of its effects it may have on Alberta.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, my memory is a touch faulty with respect to when the last question was asked, and so you'll have to forgive me if, in fact, I bring forward actions which may well be outside of that end interval. What has happened, Mr. Speaker, is that there is a continuing communication now between officials of my department and officials of the federal government to, on behalf of the federal government, provide as much information as is possible to the provinces so we can, at least in advance of June the 18th, have an understanding as to the broad direction that the federal proposals will take Canada tax reform along. And in that context, within the last month at least, there have been a meeting wherein additional information was provided. Views were accepted with respect to the impact of certain taxes or tax proposals with respect to the various provincial economies. And in those discussions, we did present the concerns which have been made evident to us in Alberta. I'm not sure if we'll have any additional opportunity before June the 15th, Mr. Speaker, to have further impact, that is further input, but of course we are now measuring and assessing some of those trends that are now evident to us with respect to certain sectors, certain revenue flows, or certain economic objectives, which are now the objectives of the province of Alberta.
Your supplementary question to the provincial treasurer. Could the provincial treasurer indicate whether estimates in terms of federal revenue that would be raised by the proposed business transfer tax, the value-added tax, or a federal sales tax, have estimates been calculated at this point, and are estimates available in terms of a question at this point?
Mr. Speaker, when the federal government did initiate the recommendations or the proposals which will be made available to us on June the 18th, they obviously had to run some computer models or some computer simulations to show the impact of those revenue changes on their own budget position, the revenues that they will collect. And they are now making available to us some of those numbers, both on a provincial basis and on a national basis. As you can appreciate, Mr. Speaker, as I've said in this House before, when you're dealing with the principles of broadening the base, both of corporate and personal tax, obviously you look at certain opportunities to do just that, such as the traditional kinds of deductions which we've experienced in this province. And in doing so, you have to therefore adjust each one of those to see what order of magnitude, what income impact will be, and that is now taking place. I should say that the federal government has been very generous recently in providing that information to us. I have some order of magnitude numbers which can be used by our Treasury and government officials to adjudicate the impact. But as we go along the process between now and I suppose the fall of 1987, additional information will be made available to us, and we as the government of Alberta will measure the impact, as I've indicated, on our revenue sources as well.
Mr. Speaker, could the provincial treasurer provide an estimate of the effect on our provincial revenues at this point? Now, that was alluded to in the final part of the answer. Are there numbers available that can be made public at this time so that we in this legislature understand the impact beyond just the Treasury Department understanding it? I think as Albertans we must understand what is going to happen to us in terms of taxation and how we should react to it. We're part of the group paying.
Speaker, I'd be at some point I think it'll have to provide some information, and I believe that is coming upon us to do that, so as the member indicates, we can adjudicate or assess the impact of this tax. What we must remember, though, is that there is some sense in Canada right now that the current tax system does discriminate against low income and in fact benefits high income individuals. I don't want to debate whether in fact that is the case, but that is the impression that is left. For example, we've heard comments about the size of tax loopholes, the way in which special tax write-offs are provided, and moreover such things as deductibility of certain expenses for corporate business purposes are in fact part of the way in which the tax system now operates. in a base broadening approach, obviously these kinds of deductions will be eliminated. But at this point, Mr. Speaker, our information is not firm enough that we can provide any specific details to anyone right now, because we are ourselves just now assessing the impact of revenues. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, I guess one would have to question whether or not the relevance of, say, sales tax information, which can be collected and levied by the federal government in any event under their jurisdiction, is in fact one that we need to provide information on, if you assume, specifically as I've said, that we will not have a sales tax in this province.
Speaker, final supplementary. Could the provincial treasurer either confirm or clarify the matter that as of June the 18th, a tax policy announcement by the federal government will be a fait accompli, or that we at that point in time, as Albertans, have the opportunity in an open forum to discuss the acceptance or rejection of any of those proposals in that white paper or presentation?
Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding that obviously a government doesn't put a position forward, that is, a federal government will not put a position forward unless it has some faith in the policies that are reflected in that paper. I think the broad policy questions are, as I've indicated, a reduction in the corporate and personal tax rates so that investment decisions in Alberta and in Canada are comparable to those investment decisions which would be taken in the United States, which has just gone through a tax change itself, which in fact at the margin has reduced those tax rates that I referred to. So that's the first broad principle, and I don't think the federal government will change from that. Where our concern rests in Alberta is to be sure that in the case of resource industries in particular, in terms of agriculture more specifically, that any new tax initiative, particularly on the so-called value-added tax or business transfer tax, is well understood here so we can assess that impact. I think in those latter cases where there's still debate about the impact in certain sectors, that there will be adequate opportunity for input and discussion with the federal government, and I intend to find ways in Alberta to have a sense or a series of reviews given to me so I can adequately understand the impact from experts in this province. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, I should stress that it is now my understanding that certain initiatives on June the 18th, when that paper is brought down, will in fact trigger certain decisions, so that there will be some decisions on June the 18th which will be, in the member's words, fait accompli. I think, however, the broad issue will still be open for debate, and I understand that's the way in which the federal Minister of Finance will handle it. Again, Mr. Speaker, we will have an opportunity on the evening of June the 15th to discuss with Mr. Wilson those kinds of questions. How does he expect to proceed, both in terms of public debate and public input? And we'll do that in advance of the release of that paper on June the 18th.
Thank you, Westlock Sturgeon, followed by Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, supplement to the Minister. Too, I'm concerned that if it gets into the paper June 18th, it can't be reversed. There are some areas, such as transportation and passenger traffic, that if taxed, clearly discriminate against Western Canada or the central part of the continent, central part of the prairies. So could not the Minister immediately attack with all vim and vigor to make sure that transportation and passenger traffic is exempted from any business transfer tax?
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I have dealt with this question before, and I do appreciate the understanding that the member from Westlock Sturgeon has on this issue. That is one of the serious consequences of the application of a business transfer tax, and obviously the regional impact is one of the economic concerns that we share with the member. On behalf of the province, on behalf of the government, I can assure the member, and I guess members of the Legislative Assembly, that we have taken time to point out to the federal officials and to the Minister of Finance themselves those key aspects of the proposals which we have a major concern with. And I should say that in many cases, the federal government has in fact agreed and understood our position and are attempting to accommodate many of the concerns that we have raised.
In Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Treasurer tell us that if the federal government does impose a federal sales tax on the people of Alberta that the province intends to reimburse Albertans to that amount? After all, they've just had $1 billion plucked from their pockets already by the budget.
Mr. Speaker, of course the province will not reimburse Albertans for any tax initiative taken by the federal government. That isn't my view of Confederation. It's not my view of the tax sharing arrangements, and that's not the way in which fiscal federation operates. Let's remember that in the case of the way in which fiscal Canada does operate, that even though the federal government does in fact collect taxes outside of the tax sharing arrangements, that in fact the federal government transfers back to the provinces a substantial amount of money under the so-called established program financing arrangement. That amount is very close to $5 billion. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, in those provinces which are defined as have-not provinces, that the equalization calculations do impact. And let me note, moreover, Mr. Speaker, that as described in my budget on March 20th, 1987, because of the sharp drop in revenues in Alberta this year from oil and gas, that under the established program financing arrangements or under fiscal federation, we have applied for some unusual assistance because our revenues did drop off considerably. I mean, that's the way in which, that's the financial backbone of Canada, Mr. Speaker. We talked this morning about the Constitution. You will note that on November the 5th, 1981, in fact, equalization and established program financing were part of the constitutional agreement. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that we can unilaterally adjust that in this legislative assembly.
Member for Red Deer North, followed by Edmonton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a rare display of insight and astuteness, the member from Little Bow has exactly anticipated my line of questioning, and though I know the members opposite share our joy in listening to our provincial treasurer, I will defer to the next speaker on your list.
Edmonton Centre, followed by Edmonton Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Community and Occupational Health. Mr. Speaker, with the passing of June the 1st, all of the deductibles and co-payments for disabled people and users of the AIDS Daily Living Program have now come into effect. However, for hundreds of women in the province who have had mastectomies, the situation now becomes even worse insofar as the minister has directed that breast prostheses be completely eliminated for standard coverage under the AIDS Daily Living Program. Does the Minister of Community Health not agree that breast prosthesis for women who have had or will have mastectomies is essential to their ongoing well-being, or does he consider it an elective and frivolous necessity as his policy now states?
Mr. Speaker, when we announced the changes on March the 25th, we made very clear that those people who are, for senior citizens, for those who are on the assured income for the severely handicapped, those who are on widow's pension, and others who need that kind of protection, will continue to receive all benefits under the AIDS to Daily Living Program free of charge.
Well, he's not going to get out of it that easily, Mr. Speaker. For the hundreds of women, 40 new each month at the Tom Baker Center, for instance, in Calgary, who do not fall within that category the minister just outlined, what possible explanation does the minister have for at least not having breast prostheses included under the AIDS Daily Living Program under the same cost-sharing basis as the other essential aids and services are, and not completely eliminate them?
Well, Mr. Speaker, for those who are in need and who will be covered by the protection plan that we've put in place, those people will continue to receive all of those benefits free of charge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the prosthesis may cost women as much as $600 and need to be replaced every 2 years, will the minister now reverse his display of gross insensitivity by placing mastectomy prostheses in the same category as aids, as he has here supplemental aids such as handheld showers and backrests that the minister seems to think are able to be funded? Why doesn't he include the cost of the $600 for other women under the same category?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll simply repeat what I said earlier, was that for those people who are unable to afford it, for those such as senior citizens in our province, those on social allowance, those who would be protected because they lack adequate taxable income, those people, some 90,000 out of the 116,000 receiving benefits under the program, will continue to receive all of those benefits free of charge.
why did the minister, Mr. Speaker, why did he proceed with this appalling elimination of breast prosthesis without the agreement of the Canadian Cancer Society's Reach to Recovery program, the women in there who are not over 65 and not under 18, those women who are working women who are going to have to pay out of pocket for this expense unnecessarily, or does he consider that these women, like the Honourable Minister of Hospitals, is just a narrow interest group?
Mr. Speaker, we consulted at length with a number of groups in the province, including the group that the honourable member refers to. And from November through December through to January and February of this year, consulting with all of those groups, came up with the program that we did announce on March the 25th. And yes, Mr. Speaker, we had to make some difficult decisions. And yes, there are going to be some who will receive benefits, who will not receive benefits this year in the same amount as they received last year. But in fact, Mr. Speaker, all of those people in this province who do need those benefits, who have the greatest need and the least ability to pay, those people will continue to be protected, and will continue to receive the most comprehensive range of benefits under any program of any kind in this country.
Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, people who are disabled in this fashion already have a few strikes against them. I'd like to ask the Minister a question regarding other kinds of prosthetics, artificial legs, hands. These need to be replaced, Mr. Speaker, with considerable frequency in order to keep people working and incidentally paying taxes. Has the Minister calculated or discussed with amputee organizations how these extra costs may force people to leave the workforce?
Mr. Speaker, I have spoken with a number of these groups and individuals who are amputees, unfortunately, as a result of an illness or as a result of an injury that has happened. And they face some difficult circumstances. There is no doubt about that. But some of those with whom I have spoken have said, yes, that we accept that this is something that has happened to us, but fortunately you have a program in place, Mr. Dinning, that says that we will continue to receive these benefits, and have to pay the part of the cost, but only a small portion of the cost of their benefits. And again, for those who are unable to pay, the program protects and provides protection by continuing to provide all benefits free of charge. And if there is an individual who is concerned that they can't pay and that they don't fall under the protection that we have provided, that we have put in place what I am calling a sensitive and responsive appeal process so that those individual situations can be heard and protection can be provided.
Edmonton Meadowlark, followed by Edmonton Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's been some time since the people of Alberta became aware of the Olympia and York lease deal in downtown Edmonton. This deal contravened accepted government leasing practices and significantly benefited Tory faithful Les Mabbitt. Since the last time we checked, to the Minister of Public Works, Supply and Services, since the last time we checked, has the Minister made any progress in deciding whether he will release the financial details of this particular deal, which we know are available and are in his hands at this time?
Mr. Speaker, I have not changed my position since the last time I responded to this matter in the House. It is not our practice to release the lease agreements with any of the private sector of the hundreds of properties that we lease on behalf of government.
For clarification, and perhaps the Honourable Minister could be helpful, was this matter not dealt with by motion by a question which was rejected, or by motion by return and rejected? Still on the order papers? Thank you.
Is the Minister saying that on the one hand his government is happy to release the details of the leasing arrangement on the Kananaskis Hotel, $4,000 a year for that land, and happy to release the details of the contract with Mr. Gitter last year to find that space, but he is not prepared to release the details of this particular deal, despite the fact that there is plenty of precedence for releasing private sector deals?
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable member is starting to compare apples and oranges. We're in the leasing market in a very significant way across the province. Probably the largest, undoubtedly the largest leaser in the city of Edmonton. And historically, we have not shared with the public documents that we sign with the private sector in leasing space.
Could the minister please confirm that given the spread in lease rates between downtown Edmonton and the government sector, which can be about $12 per square foot, that he will be spending, without ever letting this legislature debate it or the people of Alberta know, that he is committed to us to a $50 million additional leasehold expense over and above what he would have had to spend over a 10-year lease period for that kind of square footage?
Mr. Speaker, I definitely cannot confirm that, as I attempted to make very clear in Hansard on an earlier occasion. We responded to the Olympia and York proposal, and I indicated to the House there were a number of other developers coming forward with ideas, basically for two reasons: the thousands of construction jobs it would create in downtown Edmonton, which I would think the honourable member would be supportive of, participating in the redevelopment of the heart of our capital city, and it appeared to be a way that we could use no dollars out of our public works budget this year, next year, maybe not the years after, to achieve those objectives. I've indicated to the House that we've negotiated a range that the lease will be paid in. There's a bottom end, there's a top end, it will be market, but within those limits. If the honourable member or any other honourable member of the House can tell me what the lease rates are going to be in 1990, then we could determine within that range whether or not we made an excellent deal that will save the public money, or whether we made a deal that would cost the public money. Only time will tell that. I'm confident we made a fair deal.
Mr. Speaker, the spread won't change between those two areas. Could the minister please confirm, therefore, that he is making a unilateral $50 million job creation decision right here, right now, that will not be debated in this legislature, that nobody else in Alberta will have any chance to comment on and improve and make suggestions about? And will he confirm that this is consistent with the kind of unilateral decisions made on the lottery funding in this province as well?
Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that we have entered an agreement with Olympia and York that will generate thousands of construction jobs in downtown Edmonton, that will participate in the redevelopment of downtown Edmonton, and the public will have the opportunity to see the figures on that lease at the same point in time they see the figures on any other lease. All our lease rates are reported in public accounts.
Order, please, honourable member. We're going to wait for a little dialogue to be discontinued. Edmonton Highlands.
Mr. Speaker, I think the minister went like this and signed. Would the minister explain? He keeps talking about these 7 or 8 other developers. We've talked to a few developers who aren't so happy about being excluded, but will he tell the Assembly, if he's so convinced that he talked to 7 or 8 other developers, just which developers he did talk to and didn't give the award to?
Mr. Speaker, again, I do not share the names of private sector that come to carry out discussions. But just to make it very clear to the Assembly once more, the 7 or 8 developers were not on the same site. Various people have various pieces of property that they're interested in developing and come forward with ideas, and that's an ongoing thing. It occurs within the city of Edmonton, occurs within the city of Calgary. I've had proposals from the city of Red Deer. But I think if memory serves me correct, there are 7 or 8 within the city of Edmonton that were assessed.
Time for question period has expired. Might we revert orders of the day? Might we revert briefly to the introduction of guests? Opposed?